Your volume could be up a little bit more
On the music?
on the music, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking, did you want to lift it a little bit?
How about now? Do you hear me better?
We hear you perfect, Roman. Also, I closed
Yeah.
the waiting room, so everyone should be in the meeting now.
Thank you very much. Everyone, welcome. Very interesting, very special. See you.
All right, welcome everyone to our Tuesday Talks tonight. My name is Athena Pastera, and I'm the board president of Global Ties Miami. I just want to say welcome to everyone for this very special evening titled The View from Ukraine. Now, for those of you who may not know about us, Global Ties Miami is a South Florida-based nonprofit. Our mission is to improve international relationships through international exchange programs, summits, internships, educational initiatives, and events like the one we're here for tonight. Now, as folks continue to trickle in, I would like to thank all of our co-sponsors that have helped us to promote this event. In the interest of brevity to all our sponsors, you know who you are, and I want to extend a heartfelt thank you from the Global Ties Miami team and board. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. Please turn off your microphones to mute, so you mute yourself before the meeting begins, before the event begins. We are doing something a little bit different where we're going to welcome questions throughout the conversation. So if you could please enter your questions in the chat, and we'll let you know if we'll be calling on you to unmute yourself and ask the question. After asking your question, please once again turn off your microphone to mute yourself, because we are a rather large bunch here today, Sarah. So these little things matter. Now, although the war in Ukraine has been breaking our hearts for the last 6 months, as many of you know, the violation of Ukrainian sovereignty and atrocities began in 2014 with the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula and in the Donbass region. So tonight's event is not about hearing from politicians or international relations pundits. Tonight is about hearing from civilians like us, whose lives have been changed by this war and who have met the moment by choosing to work together to do what they can do to support the people of Ukraine in their fight. Now, as we hear from our speakers tonight, our wish is that you listen with empathy and sincerity, and that you're inspired to take action and support the efforts that are being made as the fight continues. I want to say thank you to the Global Ties Miami board for your continued support, and a special thank you to our invaluable board member and moderator tonight, Joe Treaster. Now, Joe, in addition to being an amazing human being, is a prize-winning journalist and professor at the University of Miami. He was with the New York Times as a reporter and foreign correspondent for more than 30 years, and now he handles special assignments for the Times. He worked on the Surfside building collapse and on other breaking news, and his work has taken him to more than 80 countries around the world, including Ukraine. And with that, it is with humility that I hand over the virtual mic to Joe Treaster.
Thank you, Athena. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're in for something very special this evening, a personal look inside Ukraine, a personal look into a country at war. It's now nearly 7 months since Russia invaded. Our guests, Roman Oleksenko and Jeff Hartman, are civilians. Roman is living in Ukraine. Jeff is on the phone with people in Ukraine every day. He's an American living in London with deep ties to Ukraine. Together, they're working in an organization called Ukrainian Action to bring non-lethal supplies to Ukraine. You've been getting the big picture in the news. You've been seeing the headlines. Now you're going to see the war close up, what it feels like, what it looks like on the ground. Roman, there's been some good news coming out of Ukraine lately. Really quite positive news. Tell us what's been happening.
Oh, well, hello, everyone. Before I say anything, I would like to say that even though I'm listed as a Peace Corps employee on the slide, I'm speaking as a private person here. So the views that will be expressed tonight are those of mine, and they're not representing the Peace Corps. But getting back to your question, Joe, what we have seen for the past week or so is the advance or counteroffensive of the Ukrainian armed forces, which is bittersweet. On the one hand, we see that Ukrainian soldiers and civilians are recapturing or liberating the territories that have been occupied by the Russian armed forces for several months. But at the same time, we're still losing lives. And what the maps won't show you, or the American media won't show you, is the devastation and the casualties of this brutal and idiotic war.
Jeff, what can you tell us? What are you seeing? Help us understand these latest good developments.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I mean, I think from my perspective, the positive developments in the news have not necessarily surprised me one bit. I mean, Ukrainians have been tough since the get-go. They're resilient. They've been fighting for their lives. They seem to be the better army, better motivated, better trained, and crucially, increasingly supported with Western allies, both at the top and at the grassroots level. But I do have to echo Roman's comments that there's a lot of devastation behind. It's a great achievement in retaking some captured territory, but there's a lot of people still suffering, and Ukrainians, civilians, and heroes alike still require lots of support, particularly from international partners.
What are you hearing from people you're in touch with? Are their spirits up as a result of this?
I think they are. I mean, obviously, every day is a different battle, and every victory in battle is going to boost morale. But I think people recognize it's a long, hard road ahead, and realistically, people aren't. There's no one resting on laurels yet, right?
Roman, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, from even before the invasion, and I remember us meeting for the first time on February the 22nd, the meeting that was organized by Global Ties Miami. Then I was pretty confident that should the Russians invade, Ukrainians felt pretty confident in responding appropriately. And this is something that we've always believed in, but this is something that many of our Western allies, I would say, lost faith in, and now are surprised that Ukrainians are so resilient and so brave. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely good news. I think we can all agree on that. There's a long road to go. Could you put up the map, please? Okay, Roman, would you tell us what we're seeing here? Particularly the area of the last few days of fighting?
Sure. What you see is in red, those are the territories that are still occupied by the Russian Federation. And the part in blue is basically what Ukrainian armed forces have liberated and recaptured in the past 5 or 6 days. And I would say that this map is still outdated because every day we hear about new villages and towns that are being liberated as we speak. And that gives me a lot of hope and a lot of courage.
This is a huge chunk of territory. I'm not sure the map really lets us see it, but it's more than 1,000 square miles. That's 2/3 the size of Rhode Island. It's about half the size of the state of Delaware. It's a lot of territory. So just for perspective, Jeffrey, what do you think about the map?
Yeah, I mean, Ukraine's a huge country. You're absolutely right. But what should be taken into account is that it does sit on the doorstep of Europe, and Europe can seem like a long ways away from Miami, and Ukraine even farther. But from where I sit in London, Ukraine's next door. I mean, you can drive there in 2 days.
Yeah, well, and you do. So we'll hear more on that. But Roman, you've been living in this mess now. It's one way to put it, for months. What's the long haul been like for you personally?
The first few weeks or first few months have been super stressful. The hardest part for me was, I guess, not being around my family because they've moved away. They're currently in Poland. They're coming back in a few days. But the hardest part for me was being away from the family, but also waking up every morning, usually woken up by sirens, air raid sirens. Sometimes they happen throughout the night. But also, as you're waking up, your brain is rebooting and you're going through these phases of acceptance that there's war, that my family's away, that I don't know what this day will bring, let alone this week. So I guess if you can imagine or can relate to the state of uncertainty that the entire nation is living on a daily basis, in addition to the bad news that we're coming in on an hourly basis, and then a lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation that you have to dig into and then see what's really going on, and a lot of your friends and family members, some of them are dead, some of them are fighting. And what I guess the important for the American audience to understand is that when we talk about Ukrainian armed forces, we're really talking about people who just before the invasion of February 24th were doing their own stuff. There were IT specialists, there were construction workers, people in their walks of life. A lot of them had no prior military experience. And a lot of these people who are recapturing or liberating the Ukrainian lands have learned to fire a weapon to advance in a matter of weeks. And that's, to me, is really impressive. As someone who is enlisted and is in contract with the armed forces and have gone through this experience, I feel a lot more prepared.
You've got a largely, by your description, a civilian army here. Up against a professional army from Russia. And we see reports from time to time of these fellows and women putting the Russians on the run. How to explain that? How could they be so good at this when they have so little experience?
I think the point here is that for years, the West and Ukraine as well severely underestimated the stupidity and the lack of professionalism of the Russian army. That's something that surprises a lot of Western analytics or analysts.
You meaning that the Russians aren't that great?
They're not, and we've known that for a while. We've tried to tell it to our allies. We asked them for weapons even the weapons that they're now supplied to Ukraine. There were a no-go to us in the month of February.
Well, if they're not so great, are you also not so great? And it's just you're getting along here?
Sorry, say it again?
If they're not so great and you're beating them, does that mean you're also not so great?
I would disagree. I think Ukrainian army has demonstrated considering the shortage of personnel and the shortage of sophisticated weapon systems, we've demonstrated the chain of command is unparalleled off. I think I'm not exaggerating here, but I think the Ukrainian army at this point is one of the strongest armies of the world. And it's, joining with NATO is something that we've been striving for years, and we've been denied that. But I think if we are accepted into NATO, then NATO and the whole democratic world is only going to feel better prepared to tackle the threats coming from dictators.
They are certainly looking very strong, no doubt about it.
Joe, can I just jump in there for
Yes,
1
please
second?
do. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I would just add to that that, since the invasion of Crimea in 2014, there's been a lot of investment going into the Ukrainian armed forces, and Ukraine has really increased its training regiment. And I think while Roman has mentioned there's a very large civilian population that is supporting the war effort in Ukraine, there is a very strong nucleus that has been trained for the last 8 years that is, I would say, probably trained at the highest level globally, and thus the more recent inductees into the war effort in Ukraine are able to learn from them and build around them. And I think also the other key point I'd like to make is that not only is the support from the West increasingly important, and that's very clear with support from Europe and the US, Ukraine has been able to perform increasingly better on the battlefield, but realistically, morale is everything. And from what we understand about the enemy, there's very little morale on that side, whereas Ukrainians have their backs against the wall and are going to fight this thing until the day that they die.
And just to reiterate what Jeff just said, it's basically what it comes down to is it's the army versus the people. The Russian army is fighting the entire nation of Ukraine. It's not just two armies fighting each other.
Yeah. Yes, that makes a big difference.
And one army is fighting on its own land, defending its own people, and the people is the army, and the army is the people.
Yeah. Very, very good point there. Very helpful. Jeff, tell us about Ukrainian Action. What does it do? How does it work? Give us a little understanding.
Sure, I'd love to. What does it do? I mean, we're in the business of acquiring resources and transporting them to Ukraine to support the civilians and the heroes who are defending themselves, their families, and their homeland from this unjustified and grotesque attack. A little bit of a background. I lived in Ukraine for 3 years, stretching as far back as 20 years ago. I first went there in 2002. October it was, so almost 20 years exactly, as a Peace Corps volunteer, and created a number of very strong friendships there. Some of my best friends in the world are in Ukraine, and their lives were upended by this war. And so Ukrainian Action was essentially born out of friends helping friends who were at war.
Now, you actually, as I understand it, get supplies gathered in London, load them onto trucks. First, you have to buy the trucks. You buy the trucks, you buy the supplies, and then you drive it over across the English Channel into the border, all across Europe till you get almost to the Ukraine. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. When the war broke out, I was devastated. I donated to a few causes, but importantly, I spoke to my friends and asked them what they needed, and everybody needed something. And one of my friends needed a pickup truck and mentioned the dire need for humanitarian supplies. So I found a pickup truck for sale outside London, paid for it in cash. A friend helped me with a crowdfunding website to raise some money for a second one. And the two of us loaded them up with supplies. And on March 10th, we drove from the UK towards Ukraine with nothing planned and nowhere really that we knew we could get to. But falling back on my extensive network in Ukraine and Eastern Europe in order to deliver those two pickup trucks full of supplies to our Ukrainian friends.
Yeah, very good. Were you in on that very first movement, Roman?
I think it was the second time that I joined up with Ukrainian Action.
Mm-hmm. And so when Jeff gets to the border with his cargo, where do you come in?
I usually wait at the border on the Ukrainian side already, and then a friend of mine who has a permit to cross the border because as some of you may have heard, Ukrainian men are prevented from going abroad during the times of war. But some people get the special permit, whether they have more than 2 children, or they're on a volunteer status, or some kind of other permit. But so a friend of mine who has been helping the Ukrainian Action Initiatives, he crosses the border on foot and picks up the trucks while I sit on the Ukrainian side waiting for him, usually taking a nap or following the news and waiting for the trucks to cross the border. And then I go take it from there.
Okay, very good. Maybe it's time
Actually,
for some questions.
Joe, yeah, I have a question
Oh,
actually.
fantastic.
We have Dave here that I think he had a question about the volunteers that are taking part. Dave Garcia, could you unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question?
Gentlemen, you ex-Peace Corps people, I'm an ex-Peace Corps myself. I served in Kenya in 1988. But you guys need to mention all of the civilians that they're putting their effort into this war. The firefighters we see on the news, the first responders. There's a lot of civilians putting their heart and soul into this as well.
Are you talking about civilians in the Ukraine or here in the U.S.?
In Ukraine.
Yeah. And do you have a personal connection with Ukraine?
No, I don't. I'm the president of the local Return Peace Corps group down here in Miami, and a member of Global Ties as well.
Great.
But I see these people on the news, and it's just amazing how they're fighting the fires. There's first responders working every day trying to save lives, and that's something to mention, as well as the Army.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Dave. I mean, as Roman mentioned earlier, it absolutely is an entire nation who has linked arms and joined forces to defend itself right now. And these civilians are people that Ukrainian Action is really primarily supporting. A lot of the supplies that we are driving from the UK to Ukraine are designed to reinforce the civilian brigade, if you want to call it that. Everything from initially food, but medical supplies, firefighting equipment, in fact, hospital supplies, because, the doctors as well are also, in a sense, on the front lines, right? And, it really is, taking a village, so to speak, in order to fight this war. So thanks for mentioning that. And that's a primary target of where our resources are going, because we recognize that importance.
Athena, we have another question.
Yes, we do. We have Aaron from the World Affairs Council with a question teed up. Aaron, could you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Absolutely. Thank you, Athena, and thank you, Annette and Global Ties, for putting this together, and Joe for moderating, and of course, Roman and Jeff. This is a fantastic event, and happy to be here and to support it. I have initially a question for Roman. So, the recent successes and just the general resistance that your country and your people have showed since February is really nothing short of incredible. It really, I think, inspires a lot of us around the world. My question is, as Ukraine liberates its people and regains sovereignty over its territory, what is the expectation among just regular Ukrainian people about the future of Crimea? So not the official position of the government or anything like that, but what is your sense of the expectations among the people of what happens to Crimea? And Jeff, I also wanted to ask you, the work you're doing is really, 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 truly wonderful. And I wanted to know, are you looking for additional help if there's people that I would know in London, in Czech Republic, near Ukraine, that would want to help and that are doing this kind of stuff, but maybe would be better together? Is there a good way to kind of put them in touch with you guys? And are you looking for more help? So with that, I'll mute myself, and thank you very much for your answers.
Yeah, Aaron, thank you so much for following the news and supporting Ukraine. To your question about Crimea, there's no doubt in my mind that Crimea is going to be liberated sooner or later. And because it all started with the Crimea back in 2014, and it should end with the Crimea. We have no intention of recapturing ethnically Ukrainian territories outside of Ukraine, which are part of Russia, that were given to Ukraine, had been given to Russia in exchange for Crimea several decades ago. But we want to liberate what belongs to Ukraine and what is solidified by all of the international treaties. Lastly, the Crimean Peninsula is the home of the Crimean Tatars. That's the only land. They don't have any other land. And this is these are the people who had been deported by Stalin back in 1949 on the accusation that all of them were traitors during the World War II, which is not true. And then only in the early 90s and late 80s, they started to come back. And the Crimean Tatars strongly affiliate and associate themselves with Ukraine as an independent country. So my vision of the Crimea years from now, it's part of Ukraine, but it may still be an autonomous republic within Ukraine with more rights and representation in the local government by the Crimean Tatars. They deserve that. And they've been fighting bravely to liberate Ukraine of the Russian enemies.
Was the second part of that question for you, Jeff? What can people do?
Yeah, I believe it was. Thanks a lot, Aaron. Absolutely is the short answer. What began with two friends buying some pickup trucks and driving to Ukraine has quickly grown over the last 6 months into an official U.S. registered NGO. We have completed 17 missions to date and delivered 76 pickup trucks, all loaded with humanitarian and medical supplies. Our strength is exactly our volunteers. So we would welcome partnerships in the UK, Czech Republic, or even in the US. We have a pretty strong team now based in the UK and really across Europe that handles our procurement, operations, logistics, administration, and partnership opportunities. So you can definitely reach out to us with details are on our website.
Jeff, would you like Aaron to put you in touch with some people in London who might like to be part of the effort?
He sure can. I certainly spend, I would say, at least every other day speaking to a new organization or new volunteers who are either doing other things for Ukraine or would like to get involved and start doing something. So by all means, anyone who's interested in being a part of our mission, ukrainianaction.com.
How about another question? We got something we can work with?
We do, actually. We have a number of good questions from Tom. Tom, could you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you. Hey, Roman, we met the first time you were on the call with Global Ties, and I admire all the work you and the Ukrainians are doing. I got a ton of questions. I just follow what's going on in Ukraine as much as I can, but I'm interested in learning how Belarus is positioning itself. Is it different than at the beginning of the war? And I also I had a question about Crimea, but also about Donbass. Is the Ukraine intention to take back all of the Donbass and go right up to the border where this battle has been going on for 8 years or 10 years? So the three questions are Belarus, Donbass, and Crimea again.
Can you tighten it up a little bit? What do you want to hear back?
So at the beginning of the war, Belarus was used as a launching pad for armed forces from Russia to go into the Ukraine. And I wanted to know if that's still if Belarus is still a proxy for Russia's entry into the Ukraine. Also, the Russian Air Force has been flying over Belarus.
All right, let's get that one. How about Belarus? Is it still a base for the other guys?
Yes, it's pretty much still the base. And what you have to understand is Belarus is not an independent country. It has never been. It's a Russian colony, and it has its own dictator who has been in power longer than Putin himself. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but yes, we've become Ukrainians who have been treating the Belarusians as sort of like as our, I don't know, we all treat as brothers, but Belarusians were more friendly to us than the Russians, I guess. But then with the events of February 24th, we really understood who's who in this war, and the fact that the most Belarusians are silent and not really doing much to dismantle their government is really a huge disappointment. But it's a matter of time. We saw the protest 2 years ago, and then it was just, we know the Belarusians, most of them are afraid to express that they stand in solidarity with Ukraine, but we need more than that. We need action.
Yeah, disappointing. Tom, let's have your second of your 3 questions.
Actually, Joe, if you don't mind, I have a really great question that I think ties in really well from Leslie.
Hey, let me just
So
say-
sorry, Tom.
Athena, Tom,
Yes.
just stand by because we do want to come back to you, but let's hear this cool question.
Sure. it's fine.
Yes, Leslie, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hello, Roman. It's wonderful to see you again. We've all been worried about you over the last few months. We've read that there have been many thousands of Ukrainians that have been forced into Russia. And I even read one report that there might have been children that were being adopted into Russian families. Is that accurate? And do you know anything more about it?
Yes, it's pretty much accurate, and thank you for coming back to this event. It's good to see you. Yes, we're talking about over 1 million of people who have been forcefully displaced and moved to the Russian Federation, usually far east, far north and far east. And among them, quite a lot of children. I think I don't have an accurate number, but we're talking thousands and thousands of children, mostly from the eastern and southern parts of Ukraine, like the city of Mariupol.
What's the prospect of getting them back as you gain more territory, push the Russians back out of the occupied territories?
Well, some people have found their way back to Ukraine under different pretenses. Some of them don't have the means to. We don't know what's going on with them. We don't know what's happening to them. You have to understand that Russia is a dictatorship, really, and the news that are coming from there, you have to take it with a grain of salt. So we want to get all of our citizens back, at least those who want to come back.
Well, that's another layer of tragedy, Leslie, that your question reveals. God, this just goes on and on. Leslie, did you want to say something else, or can we get back to Tom? Where are we?
Yeah, let's go back to Tom.
Okay, and one thing at this point, we're going to put a map up pretty soon, but Tom's questions about the different towns and parts of the country, we'll see it on a map in a second. But what's your second one, Tom?
The second question is the goal of Ukraine government and the army to recapture all the Donbass region?
Yes. So before I answer your question, I have to remind those of you who've been in the first meeting a few months ago is that my parents-in-law live in the Donbass, in the occupied area. So I haven't seen them in a while, and I do talk to them every now and then, and I do know what's going on there, at least what they're brave enough to tell me. So our vision, most of them who stayed there, who's still staying there, we have a feeling that they want to reunite with Ukraine. They want to be liberated by the Ukrainian armed forces. And we see some partisan or guerrilla movements out there, some resistant movements in the occupied territory, including the Donbass. Plus, you have to remember that starting 2014, when the Crimea and the Donbass were occupied, I think it was close to 2 or 3 million of internal displaced people who left the Donbass and moved to other parts of Ukraine, but they still consider the Donbass their home, and a lot of them are fighting in the armed forces, a lot of them doing great volunteer projects. But we absolutely sure that the Donbass will be liberated. But it's just a matter of time.
Roman, when you say your family members are brave enough to tell you something, is that because here's our map. Is that because they're worried about their phones being monitored and other forms of monitoring?
Correct.
Okay, and Tom, what's the last question?
If you don't mind, I want to change my last question. There's been some news articles recently about certain mayors or governors in Russia are calling for Putin to step down. And there's now a reaction by Russian judges to quell that little revolution that's going on in Russia to stop the war. Roman, are you familiar with this, or is there some hope that something's going to change in the near future?
Yeah, I've heard about that, and it's very recent. I think it happened yesterday. It all started in St. Petersburg, but then the MPs in Moscow have joined up, and then the few other across Russia have also were emboldened to say that they disagree with the current government policies. It's not enough, and it's far from being that kind of movement that we've been anticipating for years. And I'll just say one thing that is still very unpopular in the West, but this is something that is being widely discussed in Ukraine, is when will we know that the Russian Federation will stop presenting threats to global security? And when I pose this question, I want you to think back to the results and the outcomes of World War II. A lot of the people are saying that if Ukraine liberates the territories that are now occupied by the Russians, including the Donbass and Crimea, and then the retreat, but the government remains the same, whether it's Putin or Navalny or someone else, because we know Navalny is an imperialist and Russian chauvinist, even though he's in prison right now. But he's very anti-Ukrainian, or at least he said things that point him in that direction. We know that it may be just a matter of the next few years before Russia regroups and attacks again, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's the Baltic states or something else. So I guess one of the things that some people are talking about, will this threat be neutralized once the Ukrainian soldiers cross the Russian borders?
How are we going to do that? How do you see neutralizing the big red bear?
Well, we've seen things that no one could really believe in just a few days ago. What I think a lot of people in the West and around the world fail to understand is Russia is the biggest and most aggressive land empire. It has hundreds of colonized ethnic groups and peoples living in Russia. Mm-hmm. They don't even look Slavic. They don't speak, a lot of them don't speak the Russian language. It's basically, we call it the prison of the nation. So this global threat that Russia is permeating is only going to stop when the Russian Federation, as we call it, ceases to exist and disintegrates in the smaller independent states. Again, something that the West is really afraid of, but mostly because of the nukes.
Well, I can see why they are afraid, and I can see that right now you are the battleground, and what happens in Ukraine is going to have a lot of relevance to all of us, and it's later that we get into these steps. Now, we've got some great photographs here, and I'm going to ask you about them. I wanted you to see the map. Actually, could we come back to the map so that we can maximize what we get out of the exchange between Tom and Roman? Is that handy? Yeah.
Actually, I'm happy to jump in here, Joe, if that's all right.
Areas.
Jump in here.
Sure. I'm sorry we haven't heard from you in a while, but Tom pointed out some specific areas, and I thought if we let the audience see those areas on the map, they might be a little more meaningful. Who would like to do that? I see Donetsk right in the middle of the occupied area. Is that the area where your in-laws are, Roman?
Yeah, pretty close. Yeah.
Jeffrey, do you want to talk about the map here? Can you say anything? Might help us understand.
I'd like to just mention that to Roman's point about ethnicities within the Russian Federation that have essentially been colonized. I mean, what we're seeing in Ukraine is really just the latest wave of forced expansion by Russia that has taken place since Tsarist times. There were battles between covert, I would say, battles between Russia and Britain in Central Asia as far back as 200 years ago, as Russia sought to expand its influence throughout Central Asia, and it has done that. And I think the westward expansion is a real threat, and underscores the importance for our attention on what's happening in Ukraine.
Yeah, both very good points. When you look at this map, Roman, could you orient us a little bit? Where did the invasion begin?
You mean the invasion in February of this year?
February. Yeah, just to kind of bring people right up to date on. We don't have any red markings where I think the invasion began. So where was it?
Well, you see, if you look at the top of the map of Ukraine, you see the city of Chernihiv. Chernihiv.
Is that Chernihiv?
Yes. And so beginning from the top of the map, the city of Chernihiv, and all the way down to the Crimea, beginning is when the invasion, all along the Russian border, is when the invasion began.
Second, can anybody on our side do anything about this sound? We're hearing every third word, Roman.
We are, and I don't know if it's from Roman or from you, Joe. So I think what
we are, and I don't know if it's from Roman or from you, Joe.
Or me. Sorry about that. We're getting to a point where it's a little bit of a stalemate right now. I just want to give you time. You'd asked for time. It's 6:45, and we have quite a few slides that we want to go through. So I don't want to, take away from where you're going, but we do want to respect the fact that we have more things to get through, and I think we may need to do that.
Okay. I think he's right in the middle of saying where the war started. Let's get that idea across if we can, Roman, and then let's get to some great photographs.
So
the war started up at unpronounceable.
Basically, it all started on all sides of Ukraine, where Ukraine borders with the Russian Federation, and also a little bit in the north when it borders with Belarus.
Yeah, they were coming to get you in Kyiv, weren't they?
Yes, and some of the groups penetrated.
I mean, wasn't the very first success that you guys had was that you pushed them back, and now they are not in the capital and you are?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, great. Let's look at some photographs. And Roman and Jeff, let's take turns telling us what we're seeing here. Okay. Can we see the second picture? Yeah, here we are.
Yeah, what you're seeing in this pictures, I don't know if you can hear me well, but you see the shopping malls all across the country.
What is
Russian bombing? Russian.
Boy. These are before and after. what happened. Oh, Intersport. Oh, I'm for the first time. I've seen these pictures a few times. When you look at Intersport at the top, what's happening? Can we has the photograph taken over our committee?
Joe, I think we're having a little interruption. We're having
Joe,
and a lag.
I think we're having a
Let me make sure you don't have any other audio on your end. And why don't I just kind of take over for just a second and go through some of these pictures that we talked about earlier. So Ramon, you were telling us, as we look at these pictures, we have the top is the before and the bottom's the after. And then we're going to move on a little bit more.
the top.
Now I'm getting some feedback. I apologize, but Joe, do you want to take it over? I'll mute myself and let's the rest of us mute Athena and Jeffrey, and let's see what happens with this for just a minute. Okay.
Rest of us mute Athena.
Not working, huh?
Hey, Joe, I think that the problem
Hey,
is
Joe.
with your is with your feedback. So I'm just going to take over a little bit here so that everybody can hear for a bit. So can we get to the next picture, please? Great. Okay. So Roman, can you talk us through a little bit of these pictures? I know Joe before had sent the question, like, what's in some of those packages that we can see inside the car? Could you talk us through some of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in some of these trucks, you can find the medical supplies like tourniquets and IFAKs, which stands for individual first aid kits, designed for both civilians and the military. You have the backpacks, you have the knee pads, you have some food. It's really hard. Maybe the next few pictures there's a picture of the things that that you can take a better look. Yeah, so the sleeping bags, you have the hydration systems, camel packs, you have solar chargers, mats, night vision. So the supplies that have been requested by the civilians and the military, but those are non-lethal, obviously, because we can't really do that. But those are the things that the Ukrainian Action have been able to supply us with. And in some of the pictures, like the picture in the middle, you can see a friend of mine who's a former volunteer who actually joined. He came all the way from the US to London and then joined in one of the Ukrainian Action missions and came to Ukraine to his former site in Western Ukraine, and where he actually stayed for a week helping his former site, as we call it, a host organization, to put together some humanitarian assistance projects.
Great. That's really interesting. And I wanted to actually have a question. Oh, actually, yeah. Okay, so let's go to this map, and I will hand the mic over to you, Jeff, because I know that you'll be able to explain what we're looking at here.
Thanks. Yeah, just to add a little bit of color to the previous photos as well, those are pickup trucks that were supplied by Ukrainian Action to Ukraine. The box is obviously the supplies that we acquired or that our partners acquired and we transported to people like Ramon, who was very instrumental in receiving those trucks, getting them across the border and distributing the supplies to the people who need them the most. So that's sort of the teamwork that is in place that Ukrainian Action carries out. And the map is, I think it looked like pretty much our route across Europe from the UK to Ukraine, or one of the routes, I should say. But it is indicative of the roughly 20-hour drive that our volunteers undertake every other weekend from the UK to Poland or to Ukraine. typically leaving on a Friday and returning home late on a Sunday.
Okay, I have a question here that I wanted to reach out to. I know we talked a lot about the geopolitics that are happening right now and a lot of that side of things, but we do have a question, Ramon, for you. Angelique, could you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Ramon. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences with us who are so far away from it. And thank you for the work that you do. I just wanted to know, it's just a simple question, like how are kids going to school and how do they have access to groceries? Because when I see pictures like that, my heart breaks as to how is that happening. Could you like fill us in on what's happening on that front?
Yes, sure. Thank you for the question. That's a good question. I think it really depends where in Ukraine the kids are and where the people are. Like where I am right now is in capital in Kiev. I mean, if you were here with me, you would not know that there's a war going on. I mean, you have restaurants that are open, you have grocery stores full of groceries, you have traffic jams, you have kids going to either the offline classes or online classes. Like when my family is back next week, the little one, who's a 9-year-old, he's going to be, he's sticking to the online schooling. And again, it's after 2 years of COVID and being an online system. Whereas the old one is a 16-year-old is intent on going back to school and hanging out with his buddies. But life in Ukraine can be deceptive based on where you are, because the closer to the combat zone you get, and even outside of Kiev in the city of Irpin, I was just there the other day. The 70% of the buildings in this beautiful satellite town is destroyed. You would not really believe what you would see. And it's only like 30-minute drive from downtown Kiev. And when you see that, you understand that many people have lost their lives. Many more people have lost their homes. And a lot of people have left Ukraine and may never come back. So, even before the invasion, Ukraine was faced with the issue of migration. Well, now, as we know, over 3 million people have left Ukraine, and it's mostly women and children. And the longer they stay outside Ukraine, the bigger the chances that some of them may never come back. So the sooner Ukraine wins this war, the bigger the chance that these forced immigrants will start to come back. I don't know if I answered your question, but I tried.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Just as a follow-up to that, that's a very good question, because I think not having access to education is certainly going to be a driver for people to leave their home or indeed leave their country. We have seen a number of villages and cities that have been destroyed where people have lost the ability to go to school. One of the things that we've tried to do is to deliver technological devices to enable children to continue studying online, such as smartphones and laptops. We have actually received a lot of donations of these devices from, strangely, from companies who typically pay to get rid of them. Instead, they're able to donate them to us, and we can drive them and hand deliver them to people who need them the most, working with our local partners to identify regions where there are children who otherwise would not be able to go to school. So that's a very big issue. Thank you for that question.
Very good, Jeff. I guess I was missing from action here for a few minutes. Have we talked about these photographs, what we're seeing now?
Not this particular one, although it looks like this one is also an illustration of some of the trucks that we have supplied from the UK to Ukraine. The large photo there looks like we're driving in our typical single file convoy fashion in Poland. The top left one is a group of our volunteer drivers celebrating a successful mission.
Yeah, fantastic. Do we want to go to the next picture? Okay. Well, let's see. Well, Jeff, what are we seeing here?
Yeah, these are pictures of, I guess the one on the left is also a group of our volunteer drivers, one of our early trips, loading supplies. As you can see, it does take quite a few people in order to carry out the activities that we've undertaken to load trucks to gather supplies and get them to Ukraine. Bottom right
you in that picture,
photo.
Jeffrey?
I think I am. Yeah, I'm sitting on the truck on the left side of the screen there, and then looks like that's me in the top right as well. Although I think what probably the most important photo in this collage is the bottom right photo. That's a photograph of a man in a village outside of Chernihiv. One of our early trucks went to a charity organization in that Chernihiv region, which is northeast of Kiev, was devastated early on. And that charity is using our truck to distribute humanitarian supplies from the city to the villages that have been cut off from other forms of supply, don't have grocery stores, etc.
Yeah.
And this is a picture of a pensioner holding a box of supplies that our partner was able to deliver to him with our truck.
It's all really touching. We're mindful that we're coming close to our close, and we got a few things we need to cover. Annette, how much more time can I be talking with folks about whatever else there is before we toss over to you?
I think it's time to go over to Annette.
Yeah, it's time. It's 2 minutes to 7. So according to our
So
time.
let me just
Yes.
say thank you very much and goodbye for my position that you've really touched our hearts tonight. You've really taken us into the Ukraine. We thank you and wish you all the best. And now, Annette.
Yeah, Joe, thank you. You did a phenomenal job, even under the unusual circumstances. Guys, Jeff, Ramon, our hearts are with you. We thank all of our partners who helped us bring this to you and who brought so many people to this Zoom. So, Jeff, I'd like to close out with one more slide, if you don't mind, and hand the mic over to you.
Okay, thanks very much. So, I just would like to say, thanks for giving us this opportunity to talk about Ukrainian Action. Ukrainian Action is a US NGO, but it began with friends helping friends in a country, Ukraine, that was being attacked. Over the past 6 months, we've grown into a pan-European network of volunteers and donors working together to support the heroes in Ukraine and support the civilians in Ukraine. We are a community of action, and we have become expert in acquiring and delivering the right resources to Ukraine. We do the hard work. We spend our nights procuring supplies and our weekends driving them across Europe. But we welcome everyone to join our mission. You can support us at ukrainianaction.com. You can donate any amount you like. We are a US 501c3 nonprofit, so all donations are tax deductible. You can contact us about donations in kind or potential partnerships, and you can always volunteer to drive with us. And we rely on volunteers, we rely on donors, and together we will win. Thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. With that said, I am on my way to the website right now, and I'll be making my donations, so look out for it. And thank you again so much, Jeffrey, for being here. Thank you for Roman for giving us the insights that you have. Thank you to Joe for moderating with us here today. And I just want to say a quick mention to our co-sponsors: Gulf Coast Diplomacy, World Affairs Council of Miami, World Oregon, Global Ties Akron, and of course the Return Peace Corps Volunteers of South Florida. Thank you again, everyone. Please let's go to the website. Let's check out and see what's happening, and I will see you all soon. Thank you and good night.
All the best, Roman.
Great being with you. Cheers.
Lovely. Everyone's
Thank you
sending
very
all
much.
kinds of lovely things in the chat saying thank you very much. Great work. So you guys earned your rest tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this.
Yeah, it
Well,
was
I was just going to say while people are leaving, that in the title of the organization, Ukrainian Action, the key word is action. Some people choose to just say words and maybe send their thoughts and prayers well, other people decide to act, and Jeff is one of them. No one asked him to do this. Even our mutual friends, some of them choose to do nothing. He's not that type of man, but and I'm super delighted to have been working with him all these months, and he's an inspiration to me, even in the most dreariest of days. So thank you, Jeff, and I hope more people will be donating, and all of you folks in Miami, thank you so much for putting up a great event tonight.
Well, thank you one more time. It's just been great.
Roman, I've got the easy job. You guys are the ones in the war zone, so you're the heroes, and it's the least that we can do.
Guys, I just want to tell you, there's still 43 people that are on. They're leaving slowly. This is like the after the broadcast, right? The
Yeah.
conversation. But I hope that you all felt that we kept it real. We wanted this to be really real, and people are. For some reason, I think I'm the only one that can see the chat. We didn't set it up that way, but thank you all for these lovely remarks. And this is what citizen diplomacy is, right? We just step into that void. We do this. And Roman,
there's nothing more real than a tech issue, right?
Yeah. Well, we had some really good questions, and it was thrilling to hear the two of you who are right in the thick of things, and then to see all the questions were right on point. It was really, to me, a very moving evening. So I'll just say one more time, thank you all. And the curtain is coming down, and off we go.
I'll be here to the end. You guys can leave.
I was just going to add, thank you so much, because it's a lot to cover, obviously. We're talking about the hundreds of years of history that have led up to this point. And all that's happening both on the ground and internationally today to support the country. So I hope we were able to convey the fact that there's a lot of actors that are engaged in this. There's still a long road ahead, and every little bit really does help and make a difference to people who are there. If you imagine a family whose child can't study or who doesn't have warm clothes, one jacket, one smartphone can make a world of difference. So until the war ends, we won't stop doing what we do. And when it does, we'll get started on reconstruction and redevelopment.
Amazing.
I'm especially delighted to see the returned Peace Corps volunteers. See Emery, Carrie still there. It's just amazing that, and these guys have been also super helpful.
Hey, the show's over. If you want to unmute yourself and say hello to him, feel free to do that.
Hi, Roman. It's Carrie. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Carrie.
Following you guys a little bit on Instagram, too much, but it's awesome what you guys are doing. I also was thinking like how you guys did some water filtration for civilians, right?
Yeah, we have. We've installed, I think, in excess of 20 systems in the Donetsk region and in the Mykolaiv region in partnership with Water Mission. But yeah, I noticed you've been liking our posts. Thank you so much for following us. Thank you so much for recommending us and for your support.
Thank you. And just to drop in some good news, one of my best friends got out of the occupied territory last week. Ooh. So I am super happy with her two daughters, a teenager and a younger one. So she's in Kyiv, relatively safe, but the sirens are almost every day, sometimes 3 times a day. And there's millions of people in that city and in other cities, but you don't know where the missile is going to hit. And it's like, every siren you go running. So it can feel safe, and they want some normalcy, but there's always, that constant danger.
This detail is just fascinating. Who's talking?
Sorry. Carrie. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in southeastern Ukraine, 2009 to 2011. And I go back often. I go back about every like 2 or so years. So I've been back, I think 4 times or something since I left Peace Corps to see my host family and my friends.
Wow.
So yeah, my host family's in Chernihiv, which was hit really hard at the beginning.
We have someone else, Tamara, not Tamara from Global Ties, but another Tamara has raised her hand, and I just can't see you, Tamara. So if you want to unmute, go ahead.
Hi, yes, this is Tamara Denisenko, and I want to say hello to Roman. He was here in Rochester, New York, as a facilitator for our open world delegation that had a special guest, Alexander Tereshchenko, and we're looking forward to welcoming further open world delegations in Rochester. It was a most memorable experience, and I hope Roman doesn't forget his visit to Rochester as well. And we do support all the activities, and we have an organization called Rak Maidan that has also been working to deliver humanitarian aid and ambulances to the various communities and people that we work through open world. So I really support, and I assume Miami also welcomes open world delegations, and I hope we can continue to work together with future organizations and delegations. Thank you, and all the best. Slava Ukraini.
Героям
Героям
слава.
слава.
Tamara has been an engine in the Ukrainian diaspora in the United States, rallying support since, I don't know since when, probably since I don't want to say year, but since forever. Been super great. And I'm super lucky to have met you, Tamara, and have remained friends throughout the years. Thank you for coming by tonight.
Thank you. And I just want to do another PR plug. I was CEO of our Ukrainian Federal Credit Union, and we have branches across the US, and we are opening up a branch in Northport, Florida soon. So I do hope all our Floridians will visit and learn more about the credit unions and especially what we do and work with for Ukraine. But we are an American credit union, just with a Ukrainian flavor.
Tamara, I want to play off what you said. I'm sorry, it's a plug too, but the only reason we have Roman here today is because Roman stayed as a facilitator in my home with 3 other Ukrainians through the Open World program. That was in 2017. And for those of you still on this call that are in
2014.
14. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Yes,
because
you're
it was
right.
in Rochester 2017. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Well, that guy can be in 2 places at one time. Look at what he's
Right.
doing now. But what I was going to say, for those of you in the Miami area and other cities, we need homestay hosts. I mean, we never would have met him had Walter and I not opened our door in our home. So a couple of people on the call tonight, I know they've also hosted Ukrainians in Miami and other open world delegations, but send me a note if at some point, because if I have the homestay host, then I'll take some programs, and I'll particularly take Ukrainian programs for Ukraine and Armenian programs for my Armenian friends. So let's stay in touch. I mean, this is really, really important, and it's very powerful.
Well, wonderful. And I have a Walter at home too, who and we hosted many groups since 2006. I've been working with the Open World program. So thank you all. It was a wonderful experience. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to hold it. I'm the last one out the door. So, I'm propping the door open for everyone else. You can leave when you need to leave.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So much for your time. Thank you.
Athena, thank you. Great job fielding the questions, even with our back and forth on all this. And thank you all for amazing questions and being part of this.
Very good.
Outstanding job, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the after chat here has just been wonderful. And we'll never go home. Just keep talking.
Those poor guys have to go to bed.
It's like 12 for us here, right, Jeffrey? And then
It is, but you've got us all excited now talking about our favorite topic. So it's more than a pleasure to stay up late and chat.
It's like a cocktail hour after the official ceremony. You go to hang out.
That's it.
Yeah,
I'm getting a glass of
the late night has begun.
The after party here.
It's the after, yeah.
Roman, can I ask you just a question about your thoughts on the future of Ukraine with regard to the European Union? And you can like kick me out if you want to close this down, but while I have you here, I just want to ask, do you see, how likely, I guess, would you see the possibility of a future in which Ukraine is part of the EU? Assuming that once the war comes to a close, after that, when we're talking about peace and redevelopment. What do you
Right.
see?
That's a great question, Aaron. Well, Ukraine has signed the documents that basically pave the road to join with the European Union once some of the conditions are met. Ukraine has been ready to join for years. I remember living in the US back in 2001, asking one of the British experts who came to University of Southern California to talk about European Union and the expansion, because at the time they were ready to embrace some of the new members like Romania, I think, Slovenia, I can't remember. And when I asked him the question, like, what are the chances of Ukraine being accepted in the near future? He said, zilch. And everybody laughed in the room. So I think that brings me to the misunderstanding of the significance of Ukraine for the European Union, not just for the European Union, but also for the NATO. A famous Yale historian, history professor Timothy Snyder, who specializes in Ukraine and in Eastern Europe, he says that one of the reasons Ukraine has been denied NATO membership in the membership of the EU has to do with the perception of the West that Ukraine is a corrupt country, which basically plays in the hands of Russia as it unleashed its aggression against Ukraine. He's basically saying that, if you're calling the Ukrainians Nazis, as the Russian president does, you're pretty much, and then you're saying that Ukraine is corrupt, you're basically doing one and the same thing. You're denying the nation, the sovereign nation, a chance to really reunite with its neighborhood, because we're part of Europe based on values, not interests. And this war has exposed so many vulnerabilities in this world, like the impotence of the international organizations such as NATO or UN or OSCE and others. It also showed that sometimes interests prevail over values, and Ukrainians are demonstrating that values matter to us the most. And again, we're talking about gas and oil and all that. It also demonstrated the failure of various opinion leaders like Noam Chomsky and a bunch of others who have shown complete ignorance in the understanding of this part of the world. It also exposed, hypocrisy on the part of a lot of people, racism and xenophobia as well. The claims that Ukraine is a Nazi country, whereas Ukraine is a home of so many ethnic groups and so many languages, including Russian, are spoken freely without any subjugation, basically. Again, influence of the social media, the propaganda, I can go on and on and on. So these are the things that have been in the way of Ukraine's declared desire to join with the European Union and NATO. And that language is in our constitution. Sorry, it was a long answer to your short. I don't know if I answered.
It's a comprehensive answer, which those of us that have stayed after in our free time clearly appreciate and value. And you may have seen, but Timothy Snyder, he wrote an article this month actually in Foreign Affairs. Ukraine holds the future, the war between democracy and nihilism.